Hey everyone, it's Carter. How are you? How's it going? Welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the fun conversation series where I get to chat with lovely other authors. And speaking of chatting with lovely other authors, I just came back from Thriller Fest. So that was 5 days in New York City where I got to see a lot of my old friends. And I got to teach a class. That was pretty cool. And I just got to hang out and hug people again and watch cool people win awards. Thriller writers are really kind of the nicest people. I really haven't met, I've met a couple that are pretty wacky, but no one who is like Machiavellian or anything like that. They're all sweethearts. So that was fun. That was the first time Thriller Fest had happened in 3 years, 2 years, whatever, 2019. So it was great. It was great. And I certainly met some new people who I'm going to be very interested in having on the show as well. Today on the show, I had Elle Marr. Elle is fantastic. We had a lovely conversation. So Elle is a thriller writer. We're a little bit of birds of a feather. And she's written 3 books. And her latest book is Strangers We Know that just came out in May of this year. Strangers We Know actually was an Audible most anticipated listen of spring 2022. And it actually reached number 4 in the Kindle store. So that's crazy. It's funny when your book comes out, it's fun to go to look at your Amazon rankings and see, it changes by the hour. And sometimes when there's a promo going on, and your ebook is discounted to like $1.99 for like a day, you can just go and see how high up in the Kindle store it gets. So getting up to number 4 in the Kindle store out of all those millions of titles, is pretty impressive. So we had a fantastic conversation. She's a lovely person. She talks a lot about, she's one of these writers who I've talked to several of them who were pretty much addicted to libraries as a kid, and she is very widely read, and her love of books came to her at a very early age. And she wrote her first novel during NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, which is a daunting challenge. I think you have to write something like 50,000 words and essentially complete a draft in 1 month. So you're writing, whatever that is, a few thousand words a day. And it's, I've never done it. It seems terrible, but, for a lot of people, that's kind of, forces them to get their novel done. So we had a good time talking about that. And I think you'll enjoy the conversation. She's very intriguing and she had a lot of good advice for aspiring writers. So enjoy. This is my conversation with Elle Marr.
Hi, Carter. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Very well. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to be able to talk to you. First of all, you've got a great author name. Elle Marr. It just looks good on a book, right? So I don't know. I don't know if that's your real name or if it's your pen name, but it's a great author name.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So where are you? You're in Oregon, is that right?
I'm in Oregon.
Okay. Have you been there for a while?
The last 6 years actually. It's funny. Like my last 3 books have been set in Oregon, so I'm tied to the place. I'm not not leaving anytime soon.
Do you enjoy writing about places that then does that make it easier for you, or you just like to explore it more, or what's kind of the thinking behind that?
Yeah, I enjoy knowing a place intimately well. I try to, it's just easier for my writing process to be able to visualize a place and then to further hopefully have that place come alive on paper to a reader and do that, fancy, what is that Stephen King quote? The telepathy that occurs when an author writes something on a page and then transfers that image into a reader's mind. It's always more convenient for me to have been there and to have experienced the setting myself.
Yeah, and I guess I'm a little bit of the same way, although, I write standalones and I always set them in places that I usually don't know at all. And because fun. I like to go explore and whether I visit it or not, or whether I make up I might even just make up the entire town, but
Sure.
the whole world building is kind of fun for me. So, but then you kind of sacrifice some potential accuracy, and some readers might be like, "This doesn't make any
Artistic
sense."
license.
Exactly. So, but you're not from there. You grew up in California, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm from Sacramento, in Northern California, but I've lived all over California, and then I also lived in France for a little while as well.
Yeah, I saw that. I want to ask you about that in a little bit. So, in growing up in Sacramento, were your parents tied to government at all, or state capital, or what kind of work did they do?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have always enjoyed politics and actually studied international studies and, hence
Huh.
going abroad. But no, my parents just ended up there because of college.
Oh,
They
okay.
went to college nearby and they never left after that.
Yep. Yep. Got it. Usually, yeah. Most people I know who live in Sacramento are usually tied to the state government
Yeah,
there.
most people
Um,
are.
and then, I also grew up in California, in Southern California. But as you're growing up in California, um, are you, you know, a big reader, or at some point are you kind of gravitating towards the idea of writing or creativity, or where did that kind of outlet come from?
Yeah, I've always been a voracious reader. Like as a young kid, I was reading way above my grade level, reading stuff I probably shouldn't have, holding up the book in the backseat of the car, trying to get the headlights to shine just so on that paragraph.
Hmm.
So it was a natural transition for me to go from reading other stories to writing my own. I vividly recall as like an 11-year-old thinking, how in the world would someone write a book, write a full book? And at the time I was reading, 100-page stories.
Right.
And now I'm writing 300-page stories. So I vividly recall thinking, you have to go and get like a college degree and like suffer and like be trained and formulated by other experts. Like probably never going to happen for me. But then I discovered a lot of different workarounds there.
Yeah, I mean, the suffering part is absolutely true.
That's true.
You
That's
do
very
have
true.
to do that, but yeah, you're right. You don't have to have any formal education at all to be a writer. I certainly didn't study writing. I didn't, when I went to business school essentially. And so, my 4 years of undergrad, I didn't take a single class that required me to read, one piece of fiction. So
Oh
it's,
wow.
I know. So I didn't get into reading
Kurt, are
until
you
like my
bragging
20s.
about that?
I am. I'm a little bit. But yeah, and then I started writing in my 30s, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it shows you don't have to you study it, but so, but where do you think that you don't hear a whole lot of people, even older people talking about the childhood, saying that they're voracious readers. I feel like that's kind of dwindling. But where do you think that came from? Did that come from your parents? That interest in books?
No.
It just came to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not to say that they dislike books or that they're anti-reading or anything like that, but I it's something that I wholly discovered by myself, and I
Hmm.
was always kind of the odd man out in that sense. And I was a very typical bookish child in that I would go to my father's credit, I would go to the Scholastic Book Fair with a blank check, and I would just fill
Wow.
it out myself, a blank signed check, and I would walk away with just a stack of books or like a giant cardboard box of books. Um, yeah, as long as I was old enough to go, probably from
Wow.
the time I was 9. So I really don't know where it came from.
Do you remember like what kind of books you typically preferred to read when you were a teen?
I read widely. I try to continue to read widely. I think there's so much benefit as an author to read cross genre, and certainly as a reader, there's a lot to learn. That's the beauty of being a reader. You live 1,000 lifetimes, right? By diving into different pages. But I think the first introduction I had to horror slash real thrillers was accidentally reading Richard Bachman's The Regulators,
Hmm.
which is, of course, Stephen King's
Right.
Alias,
Right.
Richard Bachman. And, as an 11-year-old being like, I don't think I'm supposed to read this, but then
Yeah,
enjoying it.
that's pretty intense. I remember reading, I don't remember how old I was. I was probably like maybe 13. And I was at my grandparents' house for like 2 weeks, and I would sleep in the basement. That's where they had me sleep. I mean, not like chained up or anything. That's just how they had it
That's a
set
different
up.
story.
And I read it down there,
Oh,
and it scared the shit out. And like,
in the basement.
it's
Oh
the
my
first time. I
God.
mean, I remember it's the very first time I had a visceral, fearful reaction to reading something, which is so powerful that can happen, as opposed to a visual, a movie or something like that with an easy jump scare, but just words on a page instilling fear.
Yeah,
It's pretty powerful.
absolutely.
So when you're going through school, were you focused on, I want to study English, I want to study writing, or had that not crystallized to that by the time you went for your higher education?
Oh no, I thought it was, as I kind of touched on it, I thought it was wildly out of reach. I thought you had to have an English degree, and I wasn't interested in getting that at the time. I thought you had to, then go on to get an MFA, and I wasn't interested in that. So I just studied. I had 2 errant years as a bio major, which actually comes into play in my writing. Just trying to world build now. And then I studied political science and international studies.
Okay.
So I never picked up a creative writing class. I've never actually had one.
Me neither.
But I took humanities. Yeah, exactly. Like, you don't need it necessarily for writing fiction, for writing my fiction at least. And then I got into writing novels really through National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, when I was snowed in during one winter.
How old were you when you did that?
Oh, I was 27 at that point. I was well out of college.
So that's interesting. So, well, let's back up a little bit, because then before that you went to France.
I was actually in France when I started writing novels.
Oh, okay. So you did
I was
NaNoWriMo
lonely.
in France during a snowstorm.
Exactly. And they have actually a pretty extensive French NaNoWriMo network. A
Oh,
lot of people meet up and write in Paris. And I was in about 45 minutes outside of Paris at the time. And there was a snowstorm, and I was just wanting to hear and speak to myself in English. Like most of my English speaking friends had left at that point. And I just thought, I will take on this challenge for a month. And if I finish it, great. And if I don't, whatever. And I went on to finish it. And obviously the rest is history.
that's interesting. So, but you were studying at Sorbonne. So what were you? So culinary or?
No, that would be great. The extent of my culinary interest was walking the supermarket aisle and grabbing all the cheese I could hold.
Right.
But I actually studied, I got a master's in international studies from the Sorbonne. But at the time when I started writing, I was teaching sociology and psychology at the local university in Normandy.
Okay. And, it makes you wonder a little bit about that setting of Paris in particular. The idea of going and joining other people in cafes to write is so Hemingway.
Very.
And I can only imagine how inspirational just that setting would be. I wonder, were you not in Paris at that time if you would have done NaNoWriMo that year?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't think I would have, honestly. I would have continued to be intimidated by it. And I don't know when I would have made the time to really dedicate myself to a month of writing and trying to hit daily word count goals, which of course, authors are trained to do now, or authors are trained by themselves to do. But at the time I was just very, very novice and very much intimidated by the concept even of writing a chapter. So I doubt I would have ultimately. It was a nice meeting of my world.
Right. And the snow and the snowstorm.
Snow. Yeah. Very convenient.
And just for the listeners, if you don't know what NaNoWriMo is, it's a challenge whereby you self-task to write 50,000 words in the month of November. And, that's kind of the bare minimum of what a novel would be. It's more of a novella. But sounds like you accomplished it. You hit your 50,000 words.
I did. And then I shopped that around and realized I didn't want to publish it. So I started something else. And that something else became my debut novel, The Missing
Got it.
Sister.
So when you sat down to do your NaNoWriMo book, you knew going into it, you kind of had the idea for it or an outline for it, or you were just kind of, let's just go and I don't know what I'm doing, but we'll see what comes out of this.
Let's just go. It was a complete pantsing experiment. I just wrote to myself. I wrote what I liked and what I thought was interesting.
Yeah. And it is good to have that practice novel, right? Because you do learn, so especially when you're coming from a background like us where you don't have formal training in writing, just to even know what you're doing I had 3 novels that didn't sell, but I'm like, they were all good practice novels, and you learn and you get better. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And now I have one on the shelf that at some point, if I wanted to dive into that, it's basically like a romantic suspense or romantic thriller. If I wanted to, I could, maybe whip that into something more in line with what I currently like to write. So it's just nice to have that idea or that fully fledged manuscript on the back burner, at one point, maybe in the future.
Yeah, I got one of those. I like one of the 3 that didn't sell, I rewrote. I mean, I gutted it completely. And so I rewrote it, and it's been with my agent for 5 years, 6 years. And she's like,
baking away.
Yeah. She's just like, it's just a little bit too literary. I'm like, what's the wrong with that?
Oh, don't tell me that. I feel like I have a literary novel, like somewhere deep inside me that's dying to come out.
Yeah, it is
literary.
It is interesting. So you and I both write thrillers, and, thriller, I think genres are watery notions to begin with, but you definitely get known for a certain pace and a certain amount of action or whatever. And then you do have those ideas for some other type of book. And you kind of, for me, I wonder, like, I don't even know if I could pull that off. Like I think of sometimes you'll read a novel and be like, wow, how do you even, I would get so afraid that it would be boring, that there wouldn't be enough, fear or drama or
tension, sweat.
Right? Like, and because and you probably experience this too, you can have something that is very fast paced and you'll still have people be like, it dragged a little bit. I'm like, what do you want from me? Like, literally somebody died on page 2.
Yeah, exactly. There's a dead body the first paragraph. Yeah. That's definitely my concern as well with different genres.
But it sounds like you read across all different genres. Do you find when you're, because I don't read that many thrillers unless I'm blurbing or something like that. And not because I don't necessarily, there's so much to read.
Yeah.
But I do sometimes, like, we'll be reading a thriller and I'll be distracted. I'll be like, this isn't good, or, I would have done it this way. Do you run into that when you're reading?
To a certain extent, when I'm reading thrillers, I have a hard time being immersed in it. I'm always kind of approaching it from an author perspective, or like analyzing. A contemporary perspective of like, how did this person do that, and why am I feeling this feeling right now? Oh, it's because 5 pages earlier they planted the seed that this gun would be sitting here in the mantle for the next X amount of time.
Right.
So I'm too busy. Like, it's hard for me to just enjoy as a reader. I'm observing and taking notes.
Right. Yeah. And it's weird sometimes when you know the author and you're like, oh, I see them in there, or like, this is the bias that I know that they have, and I see it coming out in their pages right now. That's funny. What, so when you did NaNoWriMo, was that also of the same kind? Like, would you classify that a thriller, that book?
Yes, because I think you mentioned like totally repackaging, gutting one of your manuscripts, because I gutted it several times. I reworked it from all different angles before I finally put it to bed and said, good night, this is not going to happen.
So what makes you, and I get this question too, like, what drew you to kind of the idea of thrillers? What about it is interesting to you that makes it fun for you to write?
Yeah, I distinctly recall the first book that really gripped me, and made me desire to write thrillers myself, and it was Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl. I think like much of the world, 2012 hit her, and I think I read it in 2013, and I was just in awe and flabbergasted by how much I wanted to turn the page. And I strive to write thrillers that are as gripping, or at the very least, like chapters that are gripping, that make readers want to turn the page in that same sense, because I just found it so enjoyable. It was such an immersive experience, and so fun to try and figure out what exactly was going on with that story.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I mean, that was a fascinating story, and what really resonates to me about it is like neither of the main characters are very likable. And
No.
I think that's such a great demonstration of they don't have to be likable, but you have to care about them. Whatever that feeling might be, there has to be an emotional connection to them. Because if it was, and granted, it's a brilliant plot, but the plot alone, I don't think makes stories interesting. I think they can be serviceable, but if you don't care about the characters, and she did it with unlikable characters. I'm like, wow. And I don't quite know how, I've never gone back and analyzed it, so I don't quite know how she did that. But that was just my takeaway from like, how is this book so good? And I don't like either of these people.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really great point to hit on. I think there's so much discussion, certainly around female characters that are unlikable, and whether or not they can carry a book, whether or not readers will support them since they are unlikable. And I think that book was so influential, and to your point, such a great example of how I think the world building really supported those unlikable characters. I think knowing that like Go was Nick's twin, and she was like a normal person that we actually liked. Like the sister of the main male character was someone that we actually liked. And then we had these, without discussing spoilers, we had these other people supporting Amy, the female unlikable character, that made us root for them, even though we were conflicted about who these people actually were. So I think at least that's what I took away from it. Who knows what the intention was?
Yeah, and who knows what the editorial notes were like, right? Like what changed, because likability, as an author, you have no context for it almost. You're writing the characters and you have them in your head, and you don't really know how they're going to come across unless you make them so over the top one way or another. And so when you say somebody's unlikable, or unlikable female characters, that can be all over the place. Some people just say, I hate this person. Like, why? And I sometimes wonder, like, if it matters what the perception is, depending on who wrote the book, right? So as a man, if I'm writing from a woman's perspective, I think sometimes I get comments that, that maybe a female author wouldn't have gotten, or vice versa. So it's all perspective. Do you typically write from a female point of view, correct?
I do, and I like all my characters, but I've also been told that they're somewhat unlikable. So I'm with you there. It's definitely down to personal preference for readers, and certainly some editors as well. I like all my characters, and I deliberately wrote my first, in my debut, I deliberately wrote my first main character as taciturn and terse, and with maybe socially poor reactions, because she's grieving, because she's mourning the loss of her twin sister. And I think if you can't sympathize with someone or extend empathy and grant grace to someone when they're experiencing that, I don't know. I did my best.
but it's a fine line, right? And I think the other thing to talk about along those lines is strength. Like when, for example, your hero, like I enjoy throwing situations at my protagonists that are, almost insurmountable. And I don't want them to be surmounted until perhaps at the very end. I want to have a character who fails a lot, because that's interesting to me. But then the publisher might say, your hero's too weak. And I'm like, well, but it's real. I don't want this heroic, person who never gets anything wrong. And I think the same thing with likability. It's like, and that's where internal monologue can come in, and you can showcase some feelings and things like that to show that maybe they are likable. They're just not presenting that to the outside world.
Right. Not in this moment, at least, or this chapter.
Right. So what was so you wrote NaNoWriMo, got rid of that. You wrote your debut. What was your publishing journey like?
I worked on my debut, what would become my debut, for about 3 years before I got my agent. And then we sold my debut in the course of about 2 months after that.
That's fantastic.
So it was very fortunate, very lucky. I also spent a heavy amount of time on Twitter, with the writing community on Twitter. And I shout out to Twitter, because I really don't know that I would have continued as long as I did writing without an agent or without a book deal, seeing everyone else getting their book deals, if I didn't have that community. So I'm grateful for that.
But that's the other side of the coin of it, is like, because of Twitter, you were seeing everybody else get their book deals. And that's such a broad statement, because the reality of it is like very few people ever sell a book.
Absolutely.
And that's hard to kind of contextualize, right? It's hard to sometimes step back and have gratitude for, like, geez, like, look, I've got all these books published.
It's come a long way.
That's pretty amazing. So, but in your case, selling a book, 2 months after you start shopping it is pretty fast and rather wonderful. That was now you're with Amazon, right?
Thomas and Mercer, the thriller imprint of Amazon Publishing. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I could tell, because when I went to the Amazon page, I'm like, oh, 6,000 reviews.
Yeah, they do.
I bet she's with Amazon.
Well. Yeah.
Or 1,000 reviews before the book comes out.
Yep, it is a good indicator.
Yeah. That's so exciting. And so then you've been able to obviously stay with them through your second and now your upcoming third book. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I've actually signed 2 contracts with them. I just finished my third book, is coming out with them May 1st, Strangers We Know. And then I just finished developmental edits of my 4th book with them, which is titled The Family Bones, and comes out in spring 2023.
Yeah, that's a great
title. So
title.
I have been really fortunate there.
That's fantastic. And then, when you're talking to them, when you're in negotiation with your editors, are they looking for series? Are they happy with standalones? Is there any feedback on that?
I think they're content with me just writing standalones, and I am as well. It's never been discussed. We've never, I think we discussed maybe a sequel early on in our relationship, but we haven't returned to that yet. So we'll see.
Yeah. Series are interesting, right? Like, I've never written a series, and, I have nothing against them. And I'd probably make more money if I did write series, but I've never had that, like, I have an idea for 3 or 4 books. I don't know what's happening 3 or 4, chapters from now, because I don't outline. Yeah. So to pitch the idea of a series is very difficult. And also, publishers will look at, you might say you pitch a 3-book series. They might say, well, we don't even know how the first book is going to sell, so why do we want to commit to that? So it's a bit of a catch-22. I think you have to really have the 3 books done and be like, here, do you want to do it? But standalones are fun, right? Because you're, again, going back to the world building. It's like, hey, I get to explore, I get to have a whole new family for this book, and I get to learn about them and see what they're going to do.
Yeah, you get to tell yourself a story at the same time, especially if you don't outline before you write. If you don't outline before you write.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is I have that opening scene come to me. I'm like, I don't know what it means or who these people are, but I'm like, this is a cool scene. And then I kind of spend the rest of the book trying to figure out what that scene was all about.
That's great. I used to be able to do that. And now under deadline, I'm not as quick-witted. I think I have to have a map. I deviate from that map, but I have to have at least like a skeletal structure of where the story's going. Otherwise, I take too long. I take too long. Writing under deadline is a different beast for me, at least.
Yeah. Deadlines are tough for sure when you don't have an when you don't have an like the book that I just turned in, like they didn't know what it was going to really be, and I didn't know what it was really going to be, and now they're like, "What is
The
this?"
discovery.
So I'm going through some heavy edits right now, but yeah, and standalone, you get to like kill anybody you want to kill whenever you want to, and which is a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
No repercussions, no regrets. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, no, identical evil twins having to return 3 books later.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Like
just
a
all
soap
resolved.
opera.
Yeah, exactly. All resolved in 350 pages. Done.
That's funny. And then, but when you're kind of having the bones of an outline, are you knowing, yeah, are you pretty sure what the ending is going to be, or does that kind of, because I think you say you deviate, it's hard to deviate and stay within the lane still, right? Because I deviate and all of a sudden it's a totally different story. So how do you manage that process, and do you know the ending while you're kind of doing all that?
I know the general ending before I start writing. I know generally like who dies, who survives,
Hmm.
generally. And my editor ensures that I do know. We have a conversation around that. But that's not to say there aren't twists or surprises or revelations that I experience while I'm writing and that then influence the ending. So I think I didn't know the ending to my second book, Lies We Bury. I didn't know the ending to my third book, Strangers We Know, which comes out in 2 weeks. And then, yeah, I did know my fourth book's ending. Yeah.
And you
So
stayed with it.
I guess 2 out of 4.
But that's, I mean, to me, that the not knowing, or like you say, the twists that you kind of, that just come to you, that's the greatest joy of writing is that moment. You're like, holy shit, what if this happened? That would be
Yeah.
amazing. And
I
I
couldn't
never
agree
would
more.
have thought of that if I'm just sitting there thinking about the story. It has to be that kind of that organic, in the moment kind of thing. But that can totally alter the course of the book if whatever that thing is radical enough.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the fun of the discovery of writing. That's why I enjoy writing. That's why I can't stop writing if I tried. I take so much joy and excitement from it, and specifically that discovery at the end or at certain points throughout the novel. Um, I don't I don't fully understand books that are mapped out top to bottom from the beginning. And maybe someone would consider my books being that way, but there are pockets where I discover new characters, new subplots, or major twist endings that I had no clue about beforehand.
Yeah, yeah. I think you have to be immersed in it often to get to that point. It just seems to me that if you can see the whole book and outline the whole book, then it's probably, in my opinion, then it's probably going to be maybe not as unpredictable as you would want it to be, because it just takes time for those unpredictable things to bubble up from your subconsciousness into into the moment that you're sitting in the chair writing that chapter.
Yeah, I completely agree exactly, and I think that's touching on a really important point too. Of for me, I need to sit with characters. I need to sit with an idea in order to make those pockets of discovery and have that percolate. So I don't, I can't write a book faster than 3 months, 4 months, but I know like certain self-publishing authors are incredible. They can knock out a book in a month. How long do you take to write a book?
Oh, a year. I mean, that's the schedule I kind of give myself
Yeah.
is, if I'm, cause I don't write that much. I write like an hour a day. And I tried to do that 7 days a week. So if you're doing 500 words a day, you know, 6, 7 months, you can have a book done, and then, rewrite it a couple times, get feedback from your agent, stuff like that. That all takes about a year, and some take longer, some take shorter. The one that I just turned in took longer just because I had the time and I just wanted to sit with it and see what that was like. But 3 months
Yeah.
to me is crazy. Like I wrote my very first book in 3 months, but I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But that's a heavy writing schedule.
Yeah, that is a heavy lift, and I go back to writing under deadline is significantly different than not than writing for yourself. according to your
Yeah.
own schedule. I've written books that quickly because I was under deadline, and I work well with deadlines. I work well under structured like organizations.
Right. You want to be responsible to somebody else to say, so like, you don't want to disappoint them. So that I'm the same way.
Exactly.
Like, okay, I got it. They're expecting this. And yeah. Why do you think their deadlines are, why is it important to the publisher that they, I mean, I know it makes sense to publish as many books as possible from an author, but other editors are all sometimes like, take as long as you want. And we're here
Mm-hmm.
when you're done. Um,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that Amazon's like that with a lot of their authors?
I think it depends on their contracts. I think it depends on what was mutually agreed upon. I think they, I know for a fact they prefer an annual publishing schedule, because that's true to how I think Amazon Publishing approaches cross-genre publications. They want to provide content for readers. They want to provide content for specifically their people who are subscribed to their programs. And content is king these days, right? Like podcasts come out with an episode a week, and certainly self-publishing can come out with books, as quickly as that author is able to produce that and refine it. And there's so much to look at. It's important to offer something shiny for a reader to grasp onto, and then maybe explore further that author's backlist.
So would you have ever considered self-publishing?
I did with my debut. It took me, I wrote it for 3 years, trying to refine it to a point where I could get an agent and then a publisher. And I just believed in it so much. I didn't want to abandon it to myself, if that makes sense.
Right.
I considered self-publishing, but I have great respect for those authors, because I just want to write.
Right.
And I don't trust myself to market, to package, to copy edit, to pay for those services and employ other experts. But I just want to write, and so I didn't want to go down that path until I was certainly ready. And so I waited and managed to find a team that also liked that book.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, I don't know if I have a huge opinion about self-publishing. It was never something I wanted to do, because I was such an outsider to the writing and publishing industry. I needed, that third party recognition that, hey, we're going to take a chance on you. I don't know why that was important to me, but it was. But I also know, for example, those first 3 books that got rejected, if I had self-published those, that would have been a nightmare, because they were not ready to be, they just aren't good enough. I mean, there was a reason they were rejected. But once your book is out there as a self-published author, it's out there. And
it's out there, it's published.
And that can be a real albatross for some people trying to then go into traditional publishing or even selling their books. So, well, we're gonna wrap up, but before we do, we're gonna do a quick little storytelling, the making it up part of the show. So I chose 3 books just kind of randomly off the bookshelf, and I'm going to have you pick one of the books and give me a page number, and we're going to just do a quick little back and forth and see where it goes.
Okay, let's do it.
So here are the 3 books. I've got a John Connolly, Every Dead Thing. So pretty straightforward thriller. This is a book that was written like in the 40s, The Lost Weekend by Charles Jackson. And it's super depressing. And it's just about basically an alcoholic on his final binge. But it's a fantastic book, but it's a little heavy. And Allen Eskens, The Life We Bury.
Wow.
So pick one of those.
I'm not entirely sure where this is going, I'll be honest, but I'll choose The Life We Bury. It's similar to my second book's title, Lives We Bury.
So, okay. So what we're going to do, so then give me a page number between 1 and 300.
Okay. 217.
Okay. And then give me a sentence number between like 1 and 5.
3.
Okay. So I'm going to read this sentence, and then the idea is that you give me a sentence, then I'll do a sentence, and we just do a little short story based on this, and we see wherever it goes. So it's kind of like improv.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
The highway passed under me at about 60 miles an hour, disappearing into a darkness that held no other car light, no house lights, no glow of city lights.
I was isolated and fear overwhelmed me as I looked up at the black sky void of clouds.
I had to settle in. I had to relax. I knew I had about 3 hours left in this journey. I still wasn't sure what I was going to do when I got there, but I knew no matter what, somebody wouldn't come out of it alive.
The gun weighed heavy in my pocket, and I thought briefly Sheila and the way she used to smile at me back on the farm.
It was a good memory that lasted about half a second in my head until it got replaced with a fear of the unknown. I looked down at the gun, rethinking my decision to only include one bullet in it. But no, I'm going to stay with one bullet. That helps tempt the fates when you only know you've got one literal shot.
A chittering in the darkness broke my train of thought, and I locked eyes with two shiny orbs not 10 feet from me. Who was watching?
I blinked and they were gone. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe somebody was actually watching me. Did it even matter at this point? Maybe it was a wolf ready to devour me. And wouldn't that be a nice end to my day?
Do we keep going?
No, we can call it there.
That's great. I think that's an excellent last line.
It's fun, right?
Yeah, that is fun.
It's always
thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. It's always so I do that with every guest, and it's always interesting to see where you end up and where a lot of times you can kind of just almost you sense what the other person's going to say, and like, oh, I hope they take it in this direction because I've got to. Mm-hmm. But then you're forced to do whatever they say. So it's always
that's really fun.
It's a little mini NaNoWriMo.
It is, and it's exactly really great writing improv. I loved it.
Yep, exactly. Well, I'm very excited for your upcoming release. That's great, and it hopefully it's not getting old to you. Like, oh, it's another book release. Hopefully you're as excited as you were for books 1 and 2.
Absolutely, I'm thrilled with it. Strangers We Know is a fun thriller inspired by true crime headlines and my own personal experience with DNA testing. So I am really excited for readers to get into it, and I hope that they enjoyed it. They enjoyed as much as I enjoyed writing it.
Awesome. Well, I certainly enjoyed talking with you, and it's nice to meet you, and best of luck with all your success.
Thanks very much, Carter. I appreciate it.
Take care, Elle. So that was my conversation with Elle Marr. I told you it was good, right? She's great. And I thought we did a decent little story at the end there. So we had a good time. And if you want to know more about Elle, just go to her website, which is ellemarr.com, which is ELLEMARR.com. She's got a wonderful website. You can learn a lot more about her. And if you want to learn about me or sign up for my newsletter or check my appearance dates, you can just go to my website at carterwilson.com. And I hope you do. So that is it for now. I really appreciate you watching and or listening. More episodes will be dropping soon. In the meantime, thank you. Goodbye.